So there's obviously a lot of news going on with the Washington, D.C. plane crash, and it's not surprising that there's a lot of finger pointing on both sides. One side is saying it's Trump's fault, others are saying DEI, or that you can't blame the president because he just got into office. I'm not going to argue for who's right. I'm just going to give you the facts with as little bias as I can, so you can make your own conclusion when you go to argue with someone on the internet, or, I don't know. So the American Airlines flight 5342 that looked like this was heading from Kansas to Virginia. It crashed with a Black Hawk military helicopter that looked like this near Washington, D.C., over the Potomac River. And everyone died. The 64 on the plane and the 3 military personnel in the helicopter. So I think most people know around this much, but the finger pointing started happening after the crash. But before we get to those points, I just want to add some extra context that I actually didn't know until I did some searching, which is that the airspace around the airport that the plane was supposed to land in is considered one of the most difficult areas to fly in because the airspace is restricted on both sides of the river. It's also congested by the amount of civilian and military flights in the area. But in 2024, Congress actually approved more flights to and from the airport. So take that as you will. I just think it's good to know. And the New York Times says that the air traffic control was also understaffed. And yes, that includes during the crash, according to the FAA safety report. On that day, a single controller was in charge of handling the helicopters in and out and all the landing and departures of all the planes from 10 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. These jobs are normally done by 2 controllers, apparently. So this is all from the New York Times. So at 9:30 p.m., when there's less flights and it's more chill, that's when, you normally have 2 people on staff. You combine those duties into one, so then one person just does both jobs. But on the night of the crash, an air controller supervisor combined the duties. So he or she, assigned one person to do both before the normal 9:30 p.m. time when things get less busy. So this supervisor let the other air traffic controller, who's normally doing the other job, right? So either handling the planes or the helicopter, this person was like, nah, you can leave. So now one controller is doing both jobs, the helicopters and the planes, before the number of flights normally calms down. So this is before 9:30, right? So I couldn't find the reason why. But yeah, that's not a great look for the supervisor, I think. Already the situation is not ideal. So there's actually more. So if we look back just a year before this happened, there were 3 near-miss incidents that were reported. The first incident was in March 2023, where a Republic Airways plane nearly crashed into a United Airlines plane that was given the signal to take off. Next year, in April 2024, a Southwest Airlines plane was cleared to cross to another runway while a JetBlue airplane was starting its takeoff in the same runway. And then just 1 month after that, an American Airlines plane had to abort takeoff. So suddenly, stop its takeoff to avoid crashing into a private plane that, again, was given the all clear by air traffic control to land on an intersecting runway. So yeah, not great, right? A lot of near misses. Now we can get into the other facts that I think more people might be aware of, and that may have had a role. So, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I'm just going to mention it anyways, and you can decide. So first, the FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration, basically the guys that make sure air travel is safe, their administrator was a guy named Mike Whitaker, but he quit about 10 days ago because of a conflict with Elon Musk, apparently. And when this crash happened, they still haven't appointed a new administrator for the FAA department. They did have a deputy administrator that was sworn in a week before the accident, though, and his name is Chris Roccolo. So I think this is the big one that people focus on, which is that ASAC, or the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, was a department that was part of Homeland Security. So they were made to improve security when it comes to flights, and were formed after a bomb was brought onto a plane and exploded, which killed hundreds of people in 1988. So ASAC was founded in 1988 after that incident, and their main job has been to advise the TSA, and most of the recommendations that they've given the TSA in the last 35 years have been implemented. So, you taking off your belt or dumping your water, whatever, right? It probably started as a suggestion by ASAC, which then the TSA started doing. So about 10 days ago, all the members of ASAC were fired by Trump. So, this is more related to terrorism, right? But still, it's a thing that a lot of people are mentioning, so I just decided to add that for context. I think it's also important to say, though, that Al Jazeera released a report saying that aviation experts don't believe that, these changes would have influenced the crash. All right, so now we can get to the moment of the crash, and then I'll talk about what Trump said after. But yeah, so around 8:47 p.m., less than 30 seconds before the crash, the single air traffic controller handling all of this, right, as we covered, asked the helicopter if they could see the plane, because there are a lot of similar planes in the area. They said, yes, we see the plane. Can we have permission to keep track of it ourselves to avoid a crash? And the controller said yes. So now the Helicopter has permission. Then the controller said, all right, go fly behind flight 5342. So the controller instructed the helicopter to pass behind the plane. And then the two aircrafts, they crashed into each other. Not even 100 meters, which is 300 feet, above the ground. The airplane was flying at 128 miles or 206 kilometers per hour, so the helicopter basically exploded on impact, right? The airplane did have a traffic collision avoidance system equipped, but that doesn't give you alerts when you're less than 1,000 feet or 300 meters above the ground. So before I show any of the footage I found, I just want to say this is the deadliest US aviation accident in almost the last 25 years, since 2001, and it's the first accident of this airplane model. So witnesses said they saw the airplane split in half while the helicopter crashed upside down into the river below. And after the crash, of course, the airport stopped all takeoffs and landings. The black boxes were recovered though, and if you don't know what a black box is, it's like a device that records everything related to the flight. Recordings of conversations in the cockpit, data on the airplane with the engines. So basically a thing that records everything with the flight, and it's basically indestructible, for all intents and purposes. So if anything like a crash or explosion happens, you can just get the black box, extract the data, right, the recordings and all that, and find out what happened. So those have been recovered, and they're definitely being analyzed now as you're watching this video. Now I'll show the recordings I managed to find of the flight crash. And now we get to Donald Trump's response. So he first tweeted this on Truth Social, basically wondering why it happened. I don't use Truth Social, so I don't know if I'm missing anything, but it looks like the tweets are in chronological order, so I'm pretty sure this is the first, this is the only post he made. And then after that, he released a statement. So first he talked about the tragedy and stuff, and then kind of pivoted to how DEI could have been involved and how Obama and Biden did a ton of DEI stuff, and that the FAA has been too open to hiring people with vision and hearing problems, people that are literally retarded, like they have intellectual disabilities, dwarfism, stuff like that. In 2019, there was a program to hire people with disabilities, but you had to have perfect 20/20 vision, no hearing problems, and pass medical tests. So I guess people that had mental disabilities could pass, which is pretty interesting. Obama also did have a DEI program to hire minorities for air traffic control in 2013. I'll now show clips of Trump's response. And again, you can totally Google the full response. I'm just trying to show you the biggest parts that I think you'd want to watch, or the parts that you would be most interested in.
I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now, because over the years I've watched as things like this happen. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that had to be superior intelligence. We didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first because this was the lowest level, and their politics was even worse. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. A week before I entered office, they put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. They include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. Diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, A real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity, the people that are competent. But now we mourn and we pray and would like to ask all Americans to join me in a moment of silence. We'll get to the bottom of it. I've had the honor of hearing tapes. We don't know that necessarily it's even the controller's fault. But one thing we do know, there was a lot of vision, and people should have been able to see that.
I know that might have felt short, but a lot of it was him summarizing what happened with a lot of repetition, so there you go. I think for now, that's basically everything we know, and now I'm just going to go over what I personally think, so if you don't want to listen to that, then hey, I hope you learned something new, and leave a comment on what you think about the situation, because honestly, I am curious. And I personally think, alright, their attention's going to hit zero now, who cares? I personally think that the pivot to immediately assigning blame was the wrong move. Like, regardless of who it is, it could have been Biden or Obama speaking up there, right? This was a huge tragedy, so I don't think just going straight for, all right, this department became shit because of this person and that person, I don't think that's very tactful. I wouldn't even call it a good strategic move either. Like, I get it, people generally blame the person at the top, right? Like inflation on Biden or oil or whatever. So Trump is an easy target right now, and he knows it. So I think the last thing he wants is to be the person blamed for this, so he wanted to deflect to something or someone else. But nah, I think he should have gone all in on the fact that this was a terrible disaster and we should come together as Americans or something like that. At least wait for more information and results to come out and then maybe say something about why you think it happened. As a president, I feel like you should be more open to taking some hits and blame here and there. Because, you know, if people will talk shit and blame you initially, just let them, right? And then correct them later on. Because actions have consequences, and now all over YouTube and wherever else, people are going to start fighting and playing the blame game if they haven't already. And, you know, even if you're right, people are grieving, you know? So a bit of a rash move, but, I mean, this is a pretty big disaster. I got like 1,000 subscribers versus what? A population of 330 million listening to you. Like, I guess we'll never know what it feels like to be in that position. So it's a bit hard to say. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you're listening to this, you watched to the end. Wow. Thank you so much, and surely I'll make another video tomorrow.